The next guy, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. And we're talking about him and a couple others that's like, do you trust these guys? Let's dive into the metrics. So tricky, especially with this guy, 18% rostered right now. He has now scored a touchdown in 7 of the last 8 games with 8 total over that span, the most in the NFL. He's also got the 4th most touchdowns on the year. And this guy did not start until week 6, didn't even sniff the field till week 6. And yet he's 4th among all receivers in touchdowns. 8 touchdowns on 20 receptions. And all I hear about is why that's not sustainable. And it shouldn't be at all. I don't believe it to be sustainable. And yet since Hopkins got traded, wide receiver 8 in fantasy, an 18% target share, pretty good, 17 yards per target right now. A poor man, Jamo Williams. And I want to keep saying it's not going to keep going. The streak's going to end. It's Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, NWI. Like, who is this guy? It's fake. Don't buy into it. Feels sketchy. 94th in targets, 96th in catches. But again, 8 touchdowns on those 20 catches. He just scores week in and week out, and he's fresh off the most points he's gotten this year. 61 yards, 2 scores on 8 targets, the healthiest volume he's seen all year. And that's now his second top 10 games in the past 3 weeks. He's been inside your top 24 wide receivers for 3 straight weeks. And we talked about it with Will Levis, a gorgeous schedule. Jacksonville, 3rd most points to receivers. Cincy, the 11th most points to receivers. Indy, the 18th most points, but specifically giving up a lot of deep balls where Ikhine is thriving right now. And then you get Jacksonville again in your championship week. So a cake, the easiest schedule for wide receivers. I want to say it's unsustainable. I want to say I don't believe it. And yet he just continues to thrive, and he's got the right matchups to continue to eat. So I do believe in Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, at least at minimum as a week 14 bye week plug-in. I would be happy to toss this guy in. I trust him more than MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Speaking of touchdown streaks, my goodness, 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. He has scored in 3 straight games now since joining the Saints. 24, 15, and 10 half PPR fantasy points in those 3 games, and looks pretty good. And we already mentioned Taysom Hill now out. That's 17 touches 2 weeks ago, 10 touches in less than 3 quarters last week. It's going to raise the floor of everyone here and should open up more volume here for MVS. But that's the issue, is similar to Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, even worse, only 11% target share right now for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So if one of those two is going to end up being more of a fluke, I do think it's MVS. We've seen it time and time again with this guy where you get those glimpses. Granted, not quite the consistent glimpses we've seen these last 3 weeks. 3 straight touchdowns. Tough to deny what's happening there, but ultimately, I don't buy it. I think as soon as you put your faith in this guy, Westbrook-Ikhine, he's going to get 5 to 8 looks any given week. I could see MVS suddenly, boom, 0 targets and does absolutely nothing for you. New York this week, not a bad spot. Washington week 15, not a bad spot either. Both top 15 matchups. Then Green Bay in week 16. You got the revenge narrative, but I could never trust this guy in a bottom 5 matchup. And then week 17, you got the Raiders, who are sneaky, only 22nd in terms of points allowed to wide receivers. So I don't fully buy MVS, but again, with Taysom going down, with this production, if you're desperate, we've seen the big playability here. And as long as Olave's out, might be the number 1 pass catcher in this offense behind, of course, Alvin Kamara. The last wide receiver I wanted to mention is Parker Washington for you deep leaguers, fresh off a 29% target share. You saw 12 targets, hauls in 6 of them for 103 yards and a touchdown. Also caught a 2-point conversion and barely had a 12-yard touchdown sail over his head. Yet he still had 22 full PPR fantasy points on the day. Very, very solid effort for Parker Washington, who has now run a route on 70% of the dropbacks in the 3 games Christian Kirk has been out. He's averaged a 20.5% target share in those games. And Mac Jones actually looked okay these last couple games here, filling in for Trevor Lawrence, particularly this last game out. It's been pretty ugly until then, but I thought he looked more in command than we saw really ever as a Patriots fan since his rookie year. So yeah, tough schedule though for Parker Washington. Tennessee, 26th in points allowed. Jets, 32nd, although they're crumbling. Raiders, 22nd, and then Tennessee again, 26th. So 3 of the 4 matchups are bottom 6 in the league, and then 1 matchup bottom half. So not the best spot here for Parker Washington to go on one of those crazy stretch runs and be a hero, yet he's getting that kind of slot Christian Kirk high percentage throws here, and it seems to have that backup connection cooking there with Mac Jones as well. So wanted to at least mention him as a plausible add.